ideas using dollar store materials, and you guys know I love these kinds of videos very much. I have so much fun, and these ideas are inspired by room decor I've seen many times on my Pinterest feed, and also things I've pinned out because I really like. My style right now is very minimalist but also bohemian, lots of neutral colors, browns, beiges, whites. I really enjoy that type of room decor, but if you enjoy more colors or patterns, you can definitely incorporate your style into these ideas. So I'm very happy with how all of these ideas turn out, and I really hope you enjoy them as well. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started with the first idea. The first idea is inspired by rattan vases. I am in love with rattan vases. I love anything rattan actually, but vases are something that I always see on my Pinterest feed. I have a few of them also pinned out on my room decor board. I think they give such a bohemian but also minimalist look to any space, and I just decided to make my own version using dollar store items. And actually this is so easy to make. You only need 2 items, so technically this vase only cost me $2 to make, which is absolutely fantastic considering how good it turned out. To make this faux rattan vase, I'm going to be using this 9-inch cylinder glass vase from Dollar Tree, and I'm also going to use this non-slip rug. This is basically what you use underneath your rugs so they don't slip around. So I began unfolding the non-slip rug to try to find the most convenient way to cut it to size. I ended up folding it horizontally. This way I'm minimizing my waste, and also you could get 4 vases out of this piece of non-slip rug. So if you cut it this way, you're going to end up basically with more material to work with. Now this next step is completely optional, but I decided to paint my material because it has this yellowish color to it and I'm not really a huge fan of it, so I decided to paint mine. Here I'm mixing a few acrylic paints with my white chalk paint, and basically I wanted to achieve a beigey taupey color, so I kept mixing until I got my perfect shade. And one tip I want to give you is to mix more paint than what you think you're going to need, because as you can see I made a very small batch of the paint mixture and I ended up running out of paint, so I had to make a second batch, and the color is not going to be exactly the same. So make more than what you think you're going to need, and you want to do both sides of the piece. And I used this circular motion with my paintbrush. That way I was making sure I got all of the nooks and crannies. Let your piece dry very well, and then it's time to glue your piece to the vase. So I used my E6000 glue, but you could also use hot glue. I believe it's going to be way faster if you use hot glue. I just didn't have my hot glue gun in hand, so I had to go with my second best option, which was this glue. So basically here I'm showing you how I glue the piece to the vase. Since this glue takes longer to dry, I had to pin my piece to the vase to let it dry and make it easier for me to glue it all around the vase. I used tape to secure the bottom parts, and to glue the back seam I used the exact same method, pinned the top, and then I used very small tiny globs of glue. You don't want to use a lot of glue because then it's going to show on the other side and it's not going to look as good. Next we are going to trim out any excess material at the bottom and top of the vase. Let dry for about 45 minutes to an hour, and to style it I made a bouquet using this Dollar Tree greenery. I also added some pampas grass and dried baby's breath I already owned. This is the final result. I am very happy with how it turned out. I think it looks very similar to my inspo photos. For just $2, I think it's a project worth trying, and I'm going to be making more of this in the future. This second idea comes from these wood bead garlands, and I see this constantly on my Pinterest feed. So while I was at the dollar store, I saw this and immediately it caught my attention. I saw it at the toy section. I immediately liked the colors and the shape of the beads. Most of the bead garlands that I saw on my Pinterest or that I constantly see are round. Basically this project cost me only $1, and it looks very similar to the ones that I constantly see on my Pinterest. So here is how I made it. Here's how it looks undone. I was not able to put it back together, so I knew this was something I should use for another purpose. You're also going to need jute cord. I used this one that I already owned, but you could also get this at Dollar Tree. I took the beads out of the elastic cording that they come in. You're going to have half of those beads with a hole in the center of the bead, and then the other half with the hole coming through the side of the bead. And that's actually a good thing because it's going to allow the garland to have more movement. And for this garland, I decided to only use the white beads. This made my garland shorter, but if you wanted a longer garland, you could paint your beads completely the color that you want. You could leave them as they are, very cool looking with the two color beads, or you could buy two brain teasers and then have a longer garland with just the plain white wood beads. And as you can see, the beads have this shiny coating to them, and I want to make them look more matte. I applied a technique that I saw on the internet. I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but I decided to try it out anyways. I took a container filled with warm water, and without using any precise measurements, I added a splash of white vinegar, and also I added some baking soda. I basically took my beads and placed them inside of the bucket with the mixture, and the chemical reaction of these two ingredients mixed together is supposed to help me to get the coating out. Basically, that's what the article that I read said, so let's try it out. I let them soak for about 20 minutes, and then I started scrubbing the beads with a toothbrush, which is not the one that I use to brush my teeth. Trust me, this one I use for these kinds of projects specifically. Now, the big question, did this method work at all? Well, yes and no. After scrubbing a couple of the beads, I would still feel that coating on top, so what I did was to take a piece of sanding paper and I started sanding the beads where I felt it was necessary. I didn't do this in all of the beads, maybe half of them needed a bit of sanding. Since the beads were wet, that helped to get that top coating out faster. But do I recommend that you do this step? No, I honestly don't think that is worth it. I would say if you want to achieve a more natural look, just use a piece of sanding paper and you will get the exact same results without having to spend extra time on this step. Once I was done scrubbing and sanding my beads, I took them out of the container, dry them out completely. You want to let them dry for at least an hour, or you could use a hair dryer to dry them out faster. That's what I did because I wanted to save as much time as I could. And here is a comparison of the two finishes. You can see that the darker bead has more of a glossy finish to it, and then the natural bead has more of an eggshell finish. So I do see a difference in the finish, but as I said at the beginning, you don't have to do this step. You can skip this step and just move straight into the next step, which is going to be to assemble our garland. So to do this, I just alternated the beads, one with the hole going through the center and one with the hole going through the side of the bead, and I just basically repeated that step until I had no beads left. And the last step is to make our tassels. So I'm going to be taking my jute cord and I just wrapped it around my hand 10 times. Then I took another piece of the jute cord and I used that to tie them all together. Trim your bottom loops and basically your tassel is 90% done. To add the tassels to the garland, I use two simple knots. I tie them very tightly, and I'm sure there's better and more professional ways to do this, but I just chose the simplest way. It definitely has that handmade feel, and I think it turned out pretty cute at the end. And lastly, what I did was to tie all of the jute strings together in a bunch to make the tassel look nice and neat and give it a more finished look. If the ends are looking a bit crazy, you can go ahead and trim them out. And there it is, you have a very cute wooden garland made only for $2. And the inspo for my third project comes from these awesome macrame wall hangings. I've seen these all over my Pinterest and I have actually quite a few pinned out. What I love the most about these macrame hangings is the arch. I love that shape so much. I actually found the way to make this happen, this picture, as half of my inspo. For my second half of the inspo, I used this macrame technique. This was my first time seeing this technique, but I thought it was perfect for this idea because it's very beginner friendly, so it doesn't require any difficult macrame knots or anything like that. So pretty much anyone can do this. It just requires a little bit of time and patience, but I think it's pretty worth it at the end. So here is how I made this beautiful macrame wall hanging. To make this wall hanging, I'm going to be using an oval wood shape from the dollar store, and also I'm going to be using wood craft sticks, and these are the bigger kind that Dollar Tree carries. And the first step is to glue 3 craft sticks together to achieve a very similar thickness to the oval shaped wood, and I repeated this step 3 times, so 9 wood sticks to make 3 wood pieces. And you want to apply pressure to achieve a strong even bond. So for that you can use what I'm using in this video, or you could place some heavy books on top, anything to apply that pressure while the sticks are drying. And moving on to the next step, while the sticks are drying, I'm going to find the center of my oval shape. For that I used my ruler. I made a line so I knew where I had to cut. Now to cut this wood piece was a bit challenging for me, I'm not even gonna lie. I don't have a jigsaw, I don't have a miter saw, all I have is this hand saw at the moment. So I had to figure out a way to cut this oval shape because as you can see it was not fitting inside of this thing, but I decided to show you how I did it. So if you have this same hand saw, then you can maybe use this as an idea. It is not the safest, so I just recorded a small bit to show you how I did it, but then I took it to a safer, more stable place to finish cutting it. And for this wall hanging, I'm going to be using only 1/2 of the oval, and the key here is to sand your piece until it's very smooth and you don't have any wood pieces sticking out or anything like that, because the least thing that you want is your thread to get stuck onto those tiny pieces of wood that sometimes you cannot even see. Yeah, they're very annoying and you don't want that on your wood pieces, so just sand those out very well before moving to the next steps. And to make that space to hang our threads, I'm going to measure out and cut 2 3/4 of an inch pieces. Again, sand those out very well. Then I placed my 2 remaining wood sticks to create that handle. I just measured out and cut any excess wood. And then it was time to glue all of our pieces together to finish off the first part of this macrame wall hanging. You want to let your piece dry completely, making sure to move it around once in a while to prevent your piece to stick onto the surface that you're working on. And to reinforce my wood piece, I used 1 whole wood stick for the back, and I cut 2 pieces for the sides, and that's going to make it extra strong and secure. And after about 4 hours, I proceeded to sand the whole piece again, making sure to pay special attention to the sides, the corners of the wood. Basically, I just wanted to achieve a more uniform look, so it looks more like one piece of wood, not just a bunch of tiny pieces of wood glued together. Now for the macrame part of this macrame wall hanging, I'm going to be using this 3mm macrame cord. You could also use the nautical rope that Dollar Tree carries. I just couldn't find any. For the life of me, I went to 4 different Dollar Trees in my area and I just couldn't find it. So I decided to use this macrame cord I already owned. I got this one from Amazon. I'm going to link it down below if you guys are interested. I cut it a total of 51 pieces of the macrame cord, measuring 2 feet each. And once you're done, you want to divide your 51 core pieces into groups of 3. So you're going to end up with 17 groups of the macrame cord. And I'm just going to pull them through the space that we created in between the wood. After that, what's left is to begin our macrame technique. For that, I chose 3 different color yarns from the dollar store. Trust me, I tried explaining this technique and I failed miserably. I'm just going to let you watch what I'm doing. It is pretty self-explanatory, and I'm also going to include a video down below explaining more in detail how to achieve this technique, but it is very simple. I actually got the hang of it pretty fast. I tried to achieve those fluffy fringes that I saw on my Pinterest, but with this 3mm macrame cording I used, it was not working out. As you can see, I tried brushing them out, but it was not happening. So what I decided to do was to unravel a few of the macrame cords. That way I gave it a little bit more movement and interest to the piece. If you want to achieve those fluffy ends, you should definitely use a 5mm and up macrame cording, or use the nautical rope that Dollar Tree sells. That one actually comes undone very fast. And to finish off my piece, I glued a piece of cord to the back to be able to hang, and that was it. Here is how it turned out. Art is something that I'm very into at the moment, especially this plain white. I think it looks so minimalist but so high-end at the same time, and I knew I could recreate this using dollar store items. So basically I'm going to be showing you my own take on these abstract art frames. You could use colors if you would like. You could mix colors with the caulk, or maybe use colors after the caulk has dried. Either way, I think it's going to turn out very nice, but as I said before, I decided to just stay with the clean, plain frame, and I think it looks pretty good. I don't know, you tell me what you think. So here is my dollar store take on this modern abstract art, and I hope you like it. To make this texture art, I used this 8.5 by 8.5 inches canvas art from Dollar Tree, and I used 3 of them to get an appearance of a larger wall art. The first thing that I did was to flip it around and remove the hanging hook. This came out really easy, so you don't need to use much force at all, and I saved it so I could put it back on once my art was completed. The next step is to remove the canvas part. I used this very intimidating utility knife. Just make sure to take it slow when doing this to prevent any accidents. And once I made a cut all around the 4 sides of the canvas, I started pulling it to separate it from the wood. If the staples were too tight and wouldn't come off easily, I used scissors to cut the canvas around them as close to the staple as possible. I repeated this until most of the canvas was detached from the wood frame, and it's okay if you are not able to get all of the canvas part out, because this is the backside part anyways, so it's going to be hidden once you hang it on your wall. Now I decided to paint my frame, but this part is completely optional. I started mixing some of my favorite colors to achieve a taupey, beigey, colder brown color. Since the frames are more on the warmer side, I wanted something a little bit more pale, and this step also gave it a more distressed look to the wood at the end, so that was something extra that I achieved by painting this piece. The wood material, since it's not 100% wood, is more of a manufactured wood, tends to soak up the paint a little bit, so you're not going to get a super super opaque color. At least that was the case with my frame, but I really liked that distressed look. And while the frames were drying, I went back to the canvas I took out of the frame and I cut it to a square shape. Used those folded seams as a guide, and this is the part we're going to be adding our texture. So to create the texture, I used this Dollar Tree spackling, and one container was enough to cover the entire canvas of my 3 frames. I tried to keep my coatings on the thinner side. You don't want to use a lot of spackling because it's going to take a longer time to dry, and also since it's going to be heavier, it's going to be more prone to falling out or maybe giving you a harder time to glue onto the frame. So you just want to get enough to cover the entire canvas and achieve the desired texture without overfilling the canvas. And this part was my favorite part of this DIY. Here you can get creative with your textures. You could go for a smoother texture or you can give it as much texture as you want. You could also make any fun patterns. I just decided to keep mine with a more organic look. Once you're happy with the amount of texture on your canvas, let it dry. And once they are all dried, now we can glue them onto our frames. The last thing I did was to reattach my hanging hook and my art was completed. Here is how it turned out. I really like how all of these ideas turned out, and I really hope you enjoy them as well. If you decide to try any of them out, please tag me your pictures on my Instagram because I would love to know how they turned out.